Okay, I'm just going to say one of the weird episodes. Not weird as in like creepy and ethereal. No, weird as in it just has a silly premise. Also, it raises some massive questions about Federation technology and what the Federation could, in theory, have learned from this episode that would have drastically changed the way the Federation actually works. And that is something that I would caution a GM to be careful with. Oh boy. Again, like the basic concept of making contact with a particularly, what's the best way to put this? Mischievous alien race that is actually benevolent is okay. The basic premise is actually a great way to do a plot hook for a TTRPG episode too. It's like, oh hey, you found a alien probe. The probe is scanning your ship. What are you going to do? Dun dun dun. That is actually incredibly easy. Also, this is one of the episodes that involves the Argus array because the alien probe, for whatever reason, goes to the Argus array. And the crew has to, repair the Argus array to keep it from exploding or something. The probe attempts to hail them, which doesn't work. So the probe instead makes this blinding flash that somehow creates a connection between the probe and Barclay. Geordi is the only other person who actually sees the flash, but because Geordi has cybernetic eyes, it doesn't work on him. Anyways, so, another aspect of this episode is that this is an episode that has several characters in it that are named characters that are one off minor crewmen that we never see again. I mean, the way this is put together, you could just have these as random NPCs. I mean, that's the logical point of view. Uh, and also, it's like the one thing that's worth considering is are your crew that you're going to be having act out this episode, the players, going to be the top level brass or lower level players? It's worth considering when writing a module like this because Anaya, Larson, and Brower are people that could get, involved with stuff. Well, okay, they were involved to a small degree, anyways. Brower was helping work on the reactor. Larson was, well, just walking around looking for people. Anaya, however, was helmsman, low ranking stand in helmsman, kind of, sort of, but whatever. Anyway, so first thing with this is that the Cytherians are doing this weird thing where they send out probes to someplace in the galaxy, have the probe find an intelligent life form or starship, and try to bring it back to Cytheria so the Cytherians can talk to them. The episode, however, is this weird fake out because of the fact that Anaya's job is to try to run away from the Cytherian probe, which going to warp doesn't work. Yes. Well, now this wasn't exactly Anaya's idea. It was something Picard told her to do because, like, it just doesn't work. Oh, and also they do actually blow up the probe with the photon torpedoes. Again, this is one of those things that's like, why isn't the probe's attempt at communicating actually working? And that gets hand waved at the end with like, oh well, our technology was incompatible. It's like, okay, sure. Your technology is incompatible with Federation technology. It is, however, compatible with humanoid brains, apparently. Uh-huh. Yeah, the Cytherians are a weird tech race because like they're seemingly more advanced than the Federation, but they're not really a proper super tech race. They're just weird. Also, a side note is that when they do get to Cytheria, the method they use to get to Cytheria is to open a semi-stable wormhole. Yeah, Barclay opens some kind of a subspace distortion that's not a true wormhole in the sense that people normally think of in terms of being, like a stable subspace distortion that you can traverse multiple times. No, as soon as the Enterprise went through it, it collapsed. But it did take them from the area near the Argus array where they encountered the Cytherian probe all the way to Cytheria, which is supposedly in the core of the galaxy. Yeah. Actually, I just realized that they don't actually use the name of the planet that the Enterprise goes to. It just says somewhere in the center of the galaxy. That's it. They have a projection of a Cytherian appear not on the view screen, just floating in the bridge. Yeah. We don't see anything of the Cytherians themselves other than the probe and this floating head that talks to people. This is presumably what an actual Cytherian looks like, to include the weird whatever thing on the forehead. So if you were to do a Cytherian probe plot, hey, Also, the Cytherian probe is one of those like weird technology we don't understand things because it looks incredibly mundane. Like, oh, I wonder what this does. Huh. Is about the only thing you think when you see one. Then you find out what it does, and you still scratch your head because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Oh well. I think I'll use this for my thumbnail. Mm, anyway, moving on. So yeah, we have several minor players in this that yeah, I honestly don't see. This is a weird episode because of the fact that a lot of the episode it instead of having a proper A plot and a B plot, it has an A plot that takes place in multiple locations with different casts. Because you have the main bridge crew, and then you have the people trying to figure out what's wrong with Reginald Barclay because of the fact that the Cytherian probe did something to his brain that's causing Reginald Barclay to not act like himself and to try to somehow create or well, Reginald Barclay has somehow decided that he needs to have the Enterprise go to meet the Cytherians. He's not consciously aware that this is what he's doing. However, he hijacks the ship's computer and forces the ship to go to um, meet the Cytherians. One thing this episode doesn't explain is why the heck that actually is the end result when that's not what the probe was actually supposed to do. Yeah, that's a major plot point. The probe is not supposed to take over, apparently. It's supposed to just say hi and give you an invitation to come, not to force you to come. And also, the Enterprise blew up the probe, anyways. So it's just the after effect of the probe in Barclay's mind that is doing this. Also, the Cytherians were able to sort of undo the effect. I say sort of because the way Barclay acts after with this is even worse than before. And yeah, I don't get it. Anyway, so that's not something that gets explained. A lot of the stuff in this episode is really just about Barclay acting insane and doing stuff. But one of the things that's interesting about this episode is that the way Barclay acts, he is using Cytherian technical knowledge in order to do things on board a Federation ship in ways that technology isn't designed for. And that's what I find to be the most interesting aspect of this, and something that would be you need to handle this very carefully because the power of plot compelling you is the sort of thing that players are going to try to do more than once if they after it's worked the first time, Like one, the Cytherian tech was able to create a mind machine interface and download information into Barclay's mind. A lot of it in a very short amount of time. Two, afterwards, he was able to explain to Dr. Crusher how to modify a scanning technique that is normally used for isolinear circuits to work on human cells, which the way he talks about it makes you wonder why people didn't think of that before, but whatever. Knowing the Federation is probably one of those things where people just hadn't figured out how to do it right, and people didn't try it very often. The Federation is surprisingly stodgy when it comes to how they use technology. Anyways, though, Barclay um, somehow reconfigures the shielding on the Enterprise to I'm not sure if this phrase here means that it tripled or quadrupled the field strength of the shielding, but drastically improved the shielding. Triple or quadruple is ridiculous. Either way, again, this is apparently Cytherian technology that it's not entirely clear exactly how the Cytherians would have used this knowledge. It's not clear if this is some weird fusion of Cytherian and Federation technology that the Cytherians couldn't have done with the tech that they normally build because they don't build tech like that. And are we don't know. It's all weird, vague nonsense that one thing that you could use as an I guess you could say hand wave so that you can't just do this over and over again is to say that the shield reinforcement effect is temporary and only lasts for a few minutes. And then, you have to like let the shield grid recharge or something. Whatever. It's so poorly explained in the episode that you basically get to make up whatever you want if you actually bother with this at all. Dun dun dun. And also Barclay is like, "Oh, hey, we could just rebuild the telescope and fix everything." And it's like, "Oh, no, no, that'll only take a few days." And people are like, "Really? We thought it would take 2 months." Again, this is one of those things where they just kind of like hand wave all that stuff because they don't really explain any of it. Yeah, that happens a lot in this episode. And that's kind of sort of the basic gist of this though, is that Barclay's acting like a super intelligent being. Here's like an interesting question. Is Barclay actually um, acting the way a Cytherian would, or is this some weird state that the Cytherian of technology caused where he's um over basically overclocked his brain? That seems to be the basic gist of it. And yeah. Oh yeah, also it's like uh Barclay actually programs the enterprise computer to have a neural scan interfaced so that he can telepathically interface with the computer. Here's a thing, this isn't the first time that's come up in Star Trek. That has come up more than once in the past. The fact that the enterprise computer doesn't have a ready-made blueprint isn't actually all that big of a surprise because the Federation doesn't normally use that technology. But I am just pointing out that this is not something that's actually alien to the Federation. It's just not the way they normally do things. So the fact that Federation technology was able to be adapted to do that quickly and easily actually has merit. Then, of course, there's all the various episodes where they have some sort of cybernetic neural link being used to control a computer system. Yeah, that comes up more than once too. Again, this isn't actually all that weird. It's just pushing Federation tech like one step farther than what they normally go to. Because as I mentioned before, one of the things that this episode plays with is the idea that the Federation doesn't actually use all of the technology that, in theory, they actually have. They use what's more or less, by Federation standards, mass produced junk for the majority of what they actually use on a daily basis, because anything that's by Federation standards cutting edge isn't used in daily life. And most people have forgotten that it exists. Why that is? Excellent question, something to ponder. And if you were to introduce this to your players would probably question how the ship is able to open a relatively stable subspace distortion in order to travel to the core of the galaxy in order to meet the Cytherians and have that be a safe method of travel. That's the funky part about this one, is that the method of subspace distortion travel that Barclay comes up with for this is something that is, in theory, a usable method of regular travel, and it's possibly the method by which the Cytherians dispatch their probes. Yeah, that's something that the episode didn't actually tell us, is that how did the Cytherian probe get to Federation space when the Cytherians live in the core of the oh wait, it was probably this, wasn't it? Yeah. Again, Barclay keeps doing things that are using Cytherian technical information. So it just makes sense that this method of subspace distortion travel is possibly what the Cytherians use instead of warp drive. Okay, they do clearly have warp drive because, as I mentioned before, Ensign Anaya was attempting to run away from the Cytherian probe at warp speed, and the Cytherian probe was chasing them. So yes, the the Cytherians clearly do have some method of warp speed travel, but this method of subspace distortion travel is something the Cytherians do apparently have that does in fact work safely. And it's probably how they dispatch their probes. Just a guess on my part, though. Anyways, yeah, that's the thing with this. Like, this is one of those things where, from a story perspective, giving your players a fun romp, sure. Be careful how many toys they play with on their fun romp because they might want to take them home with them. Like, seriously. One thing that I have to seriously question is why is it that Geordie and Barclay were unable to figure out how to recreate this? I mean, because later on in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the crew of the Enterprise experiment with the Borg version of transwarp gateways. They actually figure out how to use transwarp gateway technology. And they never bother with this particular method of subspace distortion tech. No kidding. And yeah. Anyways, though, so yeah, the Cytherians show up. Are like, ah, yes, we're sorry. That's not what we were expecting to happen. We were just trying to initiate friendly diplomatic negotiations with you and greet you as friends, and just give Picard a set of what is might as well be digital Cytherian encyclopedias that Picard thinks is going to take the Federation decades to fully analyze. And then the Cytherians send the ship back to the Federation where they can, resume their normal lives and forget about everything that happened. All of them except Barclay, whose brain has been permanently damaged by the experience, and that he is physically unable to go back to life as normal because his brain just doesn't work the way it used to. Oh, pity. Sucks to be him. Again, if I was going to write this as a module, I would write Barclay as a plot important NPC. I would not make that a player character because Barclay does a whole bunch of stuff that is unexplainable as player actions and doesn't make sense as things that a player would do. And yeah, I think that's a good place to end this particular discussion. It's like this is something that has a lot of promise to be a fun romp for players, but it also has the danger of giving players the equivalent of magic in a Star Trek setting. Cytherian technology does all sorts of weird things when they use it in this episode that are weirdly advanced for a race that has no starships, apparently. The Cytherians in general are a very, very poorly explained race. And trying to examine the Cytherians in greater detail would be a fun experiment. Because why is it that the Cytherians apparently treat brain machine interfaces as normal? Yeah, that's a thing. That's kind of a weird thing because, like, it happens more than once in the episode. At the start of the episode, the probe makes contact with Barclay's brain in order to interface with Barclay. Then later on, Barclay builds a brain machine interface so that he can take over the Enterprise's computer and mentally control it. Is that normal technology for Cytherians? Maybe. And I think I'll end it there because, quite frankly, I've explored everything we know about the Cytherians. And the Cytherians, as an alien of the week, was the entire focus of this episode. And half of that was with Barclay as a stand in for a Cytherian because we don't actually see any of the Cytherians in person until the finale. All right. See you guys later.